conditioning. That's a super useful thing that a lot of people try to do, and some of them are able to, and some of them are not. Let's talk about why. So counter conditioning is basically when you take a stimulus and you switch its value. So the value of a stimulus is subjective and context dependent, meaning it's up to the individual perceiver, not up to us, and it's going to depend on the context. For example, some horses like scratches, some horses don't like scratches. Some horses love a really good scratch during shedding season, but not outside of shedding season, or maybe not when their coat is wet, or maybe not if they have some sort of like skin condition. We don't get to decide that scratches are a pleasant stimulus or an appetitive or appetitive stimulus. We don't get to decide that. Our animal gets to decide that. We also don't get to decide what's aversive. Sometimes smacking a horse in the face is aversive. In fact, often that's aversive. However, if you walk up to a baby stud colt and go, smacky, 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 he's gonna go, oh my God, we're playing bitey face, and he's gonna think that that's a really fun time. Because to him, in that context, it might be a pleasant situation. We don't know. That's up to the horse to decide. And that's why it's really important that you understand how to perceive, is your horse enjoying something or not enjoying something? Because that's the only way you can tell if your horse thinks something is pleasant or aversive. So applying this to counter conditioning. Oftentimes we want to counter condition because we want to take something aversive, like necessary medical treatment or some sort of thing that we want to interact with or something in the environment, and your horse doesn't like it, it's aversive, and you want to make it into something pleasant. If you add treats after your horse encounters something aversive, it's not necessarily going to counter condition it. It might, but that is going to depend on whether the exposure to the aversive is harmful or what we call inert. So an inert exposure is an exposure to an aversive stimulus that doesn't actually harm them or cause them any like excessive stress or anything like that. So this has to do with sensitization and desensitization. So sensitization is when an animal encounters something and then they become more sensitive to that stimulus in the future, whereas desensitization is when they encounter something and then they become less sensitive to it in the future. So oftentimes desensitization in the horse world is actually something called flooding. So flooding is inescapable aversives. So if you ever see a horse that's like got aversive things like tied to their body, or they're being chased around with something aversive, until they get over it, they're not getting over it. They're giving up. It's not the same thing. It's not that they're learning that the aversive isn't scary or isn't harmful. It's that they're learning that there's nothing they can do to save themselves, and so they're giving up. That's not building confidence. It might build compliance, it might build a level of obedience, but it certainly does not build confidence, and it certainly is not ethical. But desensitization is very possible. Desensitization happens a lot of different ways, but the most common way that we talk about is systematic desensitization. Systematic desensitization is repeated inert exposures to a previously aversive stimulus. So if the horse encounters something that they think is scary or harmful in some way, shape, or form, but they encounter it and then they aren't harmed, and I don't just mean physical harm, but they don't experience like a bunch of stress or anything like that, then they are going to learn, okay, even though this thing is scary and I don't like it, it's aversive, in this situation, I feel pretty safe. So then the next time they approach, they have a sense of safety in that one little exposure zone, that level of exposure that they had before. We can then build on that so that each time they get closer and closer or have like more and more exposure to the aversive, and as long as they continue to feel safe, then eventually they can be really close in interacting with the aversive and it's not going to be too stressful on them. Key takeaways from those: repeated inert exposure. If they encounter something and it causes them stress or harm in any way, shape, or form, it is not going to desensitize. If anything, it is going to sensitize them. They're going to go, oh, last time I saw that, things got really bad. So I'm seeing that, I'm anticipating things are going to get bad. We want them to anticipate that nothing bad is going to happen. And that means that when they encounter it, nothing bad should happen. Second part is repeated. So if they start to encounter something and they're like, okay, I kind of feel safe right now, don't push it. Don't make them go closer. No. Leave the situation. When they reapproach it, they will remember that they were safe there and you can get a little bit closer. But if you keep inching them closer and closer and closer until eventually they are stressed by it, then you're just gradually building desensitization. No. Get them close enough. They're like, I see that. I'm not being hurt by that. And then leave. And then come back and do it again and again and again until you can get as close as you need to. So how does this play into counter conditioning? So with counter conditioning, if you take something scary and you expose your horse to it and then you add cookies, That's like the basis of counter conditioning. However, there are actually two options there. When your horse encounters the aversive, is it a harmful exposure or an inert exposure? If it's an inert exposure, then systematic desensitization is happening alongside this pairing of appetitive like treats or whatever you're using as your positive reinforcement. If that's happening, you will counter condition. It's very simple and it works great. However, if your horse is encountering that aversive stimulus and it's a harmful exposure, if they are scared, if they are nervous, if they are stressed, then you're not going to counter condition. You're going to build conflict. Your horse isn't going to think, oh, the aversive, it was really dangerous and awful, but I got cookies, so I'm just going to forget about that. No, they remember both. And when they have two opinions of something and they don't match, that's conflict. Your horse isn't going to see it and only remember the treats. They're going to see it, they're going to remember the harmful exposure, and they're going to remember the treats. Which means that the next time they go to approach it, they're going to have to weigh out in their mind, is it worth the potential harm in order to get those cookies? And maybe they will, maybe they won't. Most often, they're going to disengage. It's going to be a poisoned cue, and they're going to say, I don't think I want to deal with it. I'm going to stick with things that are only good and not deal with things that are good and bad. So yeah, don't build conflict. Inert exposures. Make sure that your horse is never actually harmed by the aversive. Not physically harmed, but like not emotionally harmed either. And then you can counter condition.
Okay.
All right. I don't know if that's going to work.
I'm going to try not to talk over myself right now, but I make no promises. So this is Story. She is a Mustang mare that was surrendered into my rescue, and as you can see, she does not have a tail. She suffered an injury, it cut off circulation, and her tail fell off. So she arrived this day that this was recorded, and I needed to treat it. I went ahead, I started out with my mechanical clicker, and then I was like, you know what, let's just use the sound of the spray that I want to put on it, like as the bridge signal. So basically I'm teaching her when it goes shh, that I throw cookies. So I'm trying to counter condition like this potentially aversive stimulus. So you see I start with these gradual inert exposures. I'm not going to spray it directly onto the wound the first time she experiences it. You'll also notice that like she's at liberty. She can do whatever she wants. She's loose. She's free. She's not restrained. Those are all like restraints and stuff will only make her more afraid. So instead she's loose. She's free. She can leave if she wants to. But she also has a giant pile of cookies in front of her. So like why would she leave? And also before anybody comes at me for like, oh my god, you're giving her cookies. What if she like gets fat? First of all, like this is necessary medical care. So even if I was making her fat, I'd like, let's do it. She needs her medical care. But it's not going to make her fat. That's forage-based feed. It's very healthy and nutritious. It's the kind of stuff that your horse would just have for dinner. So even though I call it cookies, it's literally just food that horses eat. So yeah. So gradually, like, I was spraying it in the air around her so that it was like the noise without it actually touching her. And then gradually I had it touching her more and more, starting on like less sensitive areas, like on her shoulder and side. From like further distances away, and then I got closer and closer until eventually I was spraying it on the tail. I then realized that the wind was just blowing it back towards me from that side, so I went ahead and did it from this side. She did great. She definitely felt it. Like I could see her face would like tense up, and she would kind of lift her head a little bit and be like, I don't like that. Like yep, like you saw just there. Like she definitely doesn't enjoy it, but she's like, okay, I can get cookies. And you'll notice like I backed off because she stopped eating her food, and if she's not eating her food, that's my cue that like, nope, I don't get to continue. So once she starts eating again, I get to reapproach and do it again. If she does like lift her head up off the feed, I will stop and back away. So she has control over the situation. She doesn't have to be afraid and worried because she has control. She can make me stop anytime she wants. But like, why would she? It's not harming her. It has not harmed her. And she also gets cookies for it. So like, she's like, yeah, let's do this. So anyway, this like 3 minutes of training, and this was the first time she was ever exposed to anything like the like aerosol spray can type stuff. And then I did some injections prep with her. So I wish I had filmed this from the other side, but I just have like a capped syringe, and I'm just practicing like holding off, like occluding her jugular vein and then like poking at it like I'm gonna do a blood draw type thing, because we will maybe sedate her for x-rays, and so I wanted to like sort of touch on that, make sure that she's decent about that before we actually try to stick her with a needle by the vet. So yeah, she did really great with that too. yeah, she's wonderful. She's a very, very good little lady. And this is how emergency vet care works at a completely 100% force-free positive reinforcement facility. It's really laid back. It's really safe. It's really ethical. It's like this is necessary medical care for a nasty wound, and it doesn't have to be miserable for anyone involved.